episode 1 of Overtime. We're going to continue our conversation with Michelle and Fernando about the impact of data on supply chain. And in this episode, we're going to focus specifically on how that data creates demand signals for your organization and what to do with those signals. As always, thanks for joining. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and enjoy. This leads into my next question to you both. How can organizations understand the data they have? Because, you could have data on how many times somebody clicked something in a shopping cart, removed it, put it back, all the way to understanding the time of day that they're buying it, male to female, age group, regionality, all of it. What would be your advice to supply chain officers right now to better understand their data, things they should look for? And, is this going to help them, in your opinion, streamline into more efficient models for supply chain improvements?
Yeah, so, there's right now thousands upon thousands of applications, tools, whatever word you want to use, SaaS, name it. I think the key is trying to find an application, a tool, anything that gives you the most insights out of your data in a particular subject. I am a personal believer that not every tool can analyze everything, but there are tools that can analyze stuff really well. So if you think of, for us, supply chain and demand planning, and you use Intuit AI, one of the cool things of the tool is that it's always looking at the data from a consumer's lens. That's what it's doing. It's recognizing what Michelle said. Hey, here's the trends. Here are the patterns. And it gives you a really accurate demand signal. Then you can explode that demand signal into, okay, so how do I plan to produce the stuff or buy it, depending on which part of the supply chain you happen to be at? How do I get that demand signal to my suppliers to, again, either produce my stuff or acquire it for me? And then where do I make it? How much do I make? How much do I store? Which at the end of the day will result in three things. It's going to give you fresher product if you happen to be talking consumer goods. It's going to give you better service because you're going to have product in the right place when these behaviors are taking place. And it's going to give you a better return. And it's all given to you by the ability of the Intuit AI SaaS solution to analyze that data for you, provide you all that information, and now all I got to do is, okay, what do I do with it?
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And Michelle, I see you ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's people forget how powerful aggregate data can be. Understanding what these patterns are without thinking that you need to follow the consumer around the store. No one's in stores right now. So now the sort of, do you follow them around on their computers? And what does that mean for everyone who's working and educating and playing at home? It's not necessarily going to give you better data. It will give you more volume. But if you think about how do you aggregate these trends and how do you figure out what are the questions you want to streamline? Where are your inefficiencies along the way with freshness, availability, and sort of on-trendability, I guess, if that's a word, so that you can give that really local personal experience. I think that's the key to it. It doesn't mean that you have to get more and more and more data. And of course, I'm a privacy person, so you would expect me to say less is more, but less is more. So when you're thinking about data and you think about its impact, think about think like a computer when you're thinking about trending and trying to gather more information to get more insights. If I had this piece of data, how would it influence a decision that I was going to make? So do I need to know the age of my female consumer down to the year, or is the decade going to be useful to me? And you can tune your AI patterns along these lines. It helps to reduce your risk from people like me that are going to be asking, how did you get all this data? And it will also help you to serve your customers better, because the more that they learn through your behavior that you can be trusted, the more they will participate actively, and then you'll get a higher quality data set to work from as you're feeding in and trying to figure out how to serve them better.
Yeah, Scott, some of the things that the tools are capable of doing, is, pick any pattern you want, whether it's quality, whether it's demand planning, what parameters really affect, for example, a demand signal the most. And we get oodles, you get of data. You get the weather, you get promotions, you get tracking rates, name it. And fortunately or unfortunately, some of them matter more than others. But when you're looking at tables that have 15, 20, 30, 40 different variables, it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy for a human being to compute this stuff. And even if you do it through normal methods, not through artificial intelligence and stuff that have machine learning capabilities, it takes forever if you can ever get there. And you go one at a time. With the tools now, they can look at this stuff and tell you, with all due respect, you got 15, 20 variables. These are the 5 that really matter. That's cool, because now I can capture the other 15 if I want, or I can stop capturing. But guess what? I'm going to concentrate on this 5. I'm going to put all my energy on those 5, and I'm going to make a lot of my decisions based on this 5 first. Doesn't mean throw the other ones away, because the system will continue to learn. And if something changes, take number 5 out and put number 7. Take number 2 out and bring number 11. It's constantly learning. Us humans, we learn by doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Reading insights.
I want to add on this really quick, because this is a prior example, and I'll anonymize the names to protect the guilty. But there was a CPG company that we were working for in the past when I was working with an analytics company. And the question they wanted to ask their data was, how do I better leverage sweepstakes and coupons? And so they had all of this data, giant, beautiful board of thousands of parameters. And it was really interesting because they're making this presentation about how, and I'll hone it down. So Cleveland, they were getting really sort of weird signals back from the west side versus the east side of Cleveland. Now, I've lived on both the west side and the east side of Cleveland. In the west side of Cleveland, it's not as prosperous, or at least it wasn't in the 70s, as the east side was very bougie. The signal from the west side of Cleveland, they kept pouring more and more sweepstakes into there, thinking, well, people don't have as much money. They're going to love using coupons. They're going to love sweepstakes. So they're going to pour more and more in. And when we looked at that sweepstakes data and that coupon data in relation to how much it was actually moving product, it actually was going down. And so as a machine, it was saying, well, you should put more in it, and then maybe you'll get more. The reality was the behavior of the human beings, people who had a little bit less money that were sort of like on the cusp of becoming middle class people, didn't want to be seen using coupons because they thought it made them look poor. And people on the east side who had lots of money felt very clever when they were saving their 50 cents. So having human nature on top of this behavior, it turned out that when you actually allowed for a seamless invisible couponing using a card rather than having flip-on coupons, you actually were able to move product much better because you're working with the grain of the human beings and the culture of your buyers. So as long as you don't forget the person in the product, it's really interesting how, mathematically you might need more, but you take a step back when you have a really good data set and you're able to go, why is this trend what it is? And that's where you get this beautiful kind of marriage of, you get your Fernando in there who knows what he's doing, give him the right data, you allow him to study it over time in a clear, sensical way. And suddenly you're serving those human beings better than ever.
Our next question here is, we have all this data now. You have it in front of you. How do we use it? How do we protect it? How do we make sure it's in compliance? And, you know, in your opinion, from what you see, how can organizations show trust to these consumers that, like, hey, like Fernando said earlier, we don't even think about giving out our address and having some person we don't know come into our driveway, throw stuff on our porch, and it's there. Like, how do we enrich that trust throughout time?
Yeah, it's a really tricky thing. And I'll give you, a pattern, if you will. There was a report that said within the next 5 years, over 2/3 of the entire planet will be covered by some sort of a GDPR or European style data law. Whether or not North America gets its act together here in America, the Canadians have already got this. The Latin Americans already have this. We're kind of the holdouts here in the US. But 2/3 of your planet, 2/3 of your consumers are already going to be covered by laws that demand transparency. They want to know what you're collecting. They want to know that it's proportionate. So I don't want you to spy on my behavior all over the web to sell me a pair of shoes. They want to know that it's protected, so that if I give you my address or my credit information or my name, it's not going to be shared and processed without my knowledge or put into some creepy thing that's going to make me uncomfortable. So all of that is, it sounds really, really complex, and it is. You do need to invite in the privacy people. You need to think about how you're gathering, processing, and hopefully starting to delete information that has become outdated, because just like product in your supply chain, data gets old fast. So don't let some of these data brokers sell you old cabbages. You want the fresh stuff. And the more you can actually engage in understanding your consumer and how you're collecting it with clear methodology, just as you would any physical product, that's sort of the first step. Understand that data has a supply chain, data has a life cycle, and data has all the sorts of fault lines and security glitches that your physical supply chain does. So when you create a digital twin of that supply chain, you're starting to understand where you need the insertion of data, what you need to recognize, how much do you need to personalize that information to an individual versus a group of individuals or type of individuals, and then when to let go. When do you let go of that inventory of data that's not serving you anymore? And that's how you really get on top of this, is take a very common sense approach to it and look at it like your consumer. And it becomes a less daunting task to try to manage what's known as a wicked problem. So wicked problems are never solved. You can throw as much money at privacy as you want, and privacy will still persist as an issue you need to manage. So the key is understanding that you've got a number of different constituencies and people who are going to be interested in the data. You've got a number of different complexities, and you've got time. So just as your supply chain, you're going to constantly be growing the corn to turn into popcorn. You're going to constantly be cultivating new consumer information to turn into buying information and buying events.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot. And I think, and Fernando, I hope you go in a little more on top of this, but this goes back to what our last question was, is the understanding the data, using tools to augment that through AI and machine learning, so that you're not just erroneously collecting data. That, what do you need it for? What do you need? Is an email really helping you sell more products? Is a phone number really going to do it, as opposed to a geographical state, an age group? You know, are you in college? Are you not? Are you athletic? Like, that might be different things that people are more apt to give out as opposed to personal. And Fernando, I'll push that to you right now. Do you feel that supply chain officers are speaking out enough to kind of find this new data and understand, you know, what it is that we're looking for? Like, as Michelle said, working with the CPOs and the CDOs, is this kind of a new a new area for supply chain officers, kind of a new growth, if you will?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of my colleagues and a lot of companies have been mining and nurturing, this discussion for a long time. Some are more advanced than others. I think what is different is the capabilities that exist now that didn't exist 10 years ago, 15 years ago. All right. So I'm not going to talk about last year. The other part that is different is the way for us to solve what data we need and how do we get it was always clunkered by security constraints, because you had to protect privacy, get it. And the ways to protect privacy, the easiest way to do it, and Michelle, my trend, you're going to be really busy in the years to come.
Yes.
Because we have to change from the way to provide security is put a firewall. I get it. I mean, firewalls work, and let's not talk about hacking, but it's something that prevents you from somebody getting your data. But at the same time, there are firewalls that stop you from getting data and getting help. So equipment is a great example. Any equipment you buy today for any company, it doesn't matter who you are, comes with the supplier will help you. If you let them access that machine, they'll troubleshoot it for you. They'll tell you what to do. Whoa, I don't want you getting into my stuff. Yeah. So first of all, what do we do with firewalls? What do they evolve into? From a consumer point of view, I don't think it's any different. I mean, I would assume, and this is not a propaganda, but because I happen to use them, LifeLock. How many people are now buying LifeLock to monitor what's happening to your data? I guarantee you it's more than me. And I guarantee you it's not stopping. Well, is that the way that we're going to secure data in the future? Laws will come into play, regulations will come into play. Right now, I believe we got Band-Aids. LifeLock does fine, but if you think about it, it's a Band-Aid. If I could prevent the breach, I wouldn't need to have somebody monitoring this thing to the level it is, with all due respect. So now you're getting to, we will need to figure out what is this security. I think it's going to get better. It's continuing to get better, by the way. And then, the notion of what data to get, I personally don't believe we need much more data. I personally believe we need to convert the data we have into this information. And this is where the artificial intelligence and machine learning computations come into play, and understand what really matters.
Yep.
Because now I have, and I did this. I mean, I did some predictive analytics in my last tenure, and it was a lot of fun to determine what were the right quality parameters to produce the right product. And I'm telling you, we put through this equation 80 different things, 70 different things. To come back with, I wasn't making it up when I used 5. 5 really matter. So pay attention to this 5 more than you do anything else. And the chances of you ending up with the right product was like 95% confidence, at not 100. So there's plenty of applications, in the world. I mean, there are companies today that can tell power companies when to cut a tree based on wind, temperatures, growth, type of tree. Because if you don't cut that tree today, that power line has a 97% chance that it's going to go down tomorrow. That's information that exists today, but I can't do all the computations.
Yep.
So that's what I think is going to be different. How would we get better with security to allow this data to flow in the way we need to? And what data is important? I don't think getting more data is the right answer. Yeah. What is the right data we should be concentrating on?
I feel like I need to take you into every customer with me, Fernando.
I'm ready.
You are singing my song, and I think there's so many people back at headquarters that are still stuck in that more is more mentality, and more is just more to process and less to be insightful about in many cases. And the other part, in my security and privacy brethren, they think lock it down, encrypt it, forget it, write a contract and prevent people from seeing data is some sort of a protective measure. No, I mean, firewalls don't protect dragons. One of my favorite podcasts, by the way. If people are going to need that information to flow, to get their job done, they're going to find ways around those firewalls, and then you've got a whole different problem on your hands. It's so much better to understand that privacy really is the authorized processing of personally identifiable information according to these principles. When you look at it that way, it's a supply chain and a flow issue. So sure, don't dump everything in your database to your supplier, but please do the right SKU so that they can deliver what you want. And sometimes that SKU has some personal data. If you're going to an insurance company, you don't need all the doctor's notes. You need to know that there's been a visit. You need to know that, here's the insurance number and you're making a financial transaction. Don't put all that stuff in risk, because the more you dump that's garbage into the supply chain, you're just making more pockets of risk as you go along. So understanding how we ask our data what we want to see, and understanding that only that, we don't want to see everything. You're not serving me by giving me more, and understanding how you actually process it, get it into the expert's hands that can look at those 5 data elements and go, these are the 5 I need, and here's my fidelity. And sure, you're going to have a couple people looking at, is there a 6th or is there a 7th element that allows for change? But you're not going to continue dragging along the oodles of data and trying to turn that into information and insights.